speaking about how we can further EV adoption in North America by improving the charging experience for EV drivers, most especially in the areas of reliability and uptime. My name is Nino Di Cara. I'm the publisher of Electric Autonomy, the industry publication reporting on the growing electric vehicle market and the future of transportation. I'd like to thank the team at FLO for inviting me to moderate today's discussion. A quick bit of housekeeping. Today's session is being recorded for future use and will be available on FLO's YouTube channel soon after. Also, attendees today are muted so that our speakers are not interrupted. However, please feel free to ask questions at any time by using the Q&A function. You can see the button, if you're using Ring Central, you can see the button just at the bottom of the screen there. And we'll do our best to answer some of these questions if time allows at the end. So on to today's topic. As the adoption of electric vehicles continues to accelerate, charging stations of all manner and size are becoming more prevalent in day-to-day life. And while this continued deployment of stations is critical to electrifying transportation, charging station manufacturers and network providers are turning their attention to making sure that the deployed stations, the stations that are already out there, are online and operational when drivers need them. And let's face it, many public stations, charging stations are subsidized with government incentives. So this is especially important. It's worth noting that charging station downtime is damaging to everyone involved in the charging ecosystem, from not just the drivers, but the site host and station manufacturers too. As a driver myself, I've certainly experienced that sinking feeling when you arrive at a charger and it's been iced with a gas car parking in the way, or you look at the charging box and there's no action coming out of it. And I know, that's something that we're all keen to avoid. So today we'll be exploring how and why EV infrastructure providers, that's the people who make the charging units, network managers, the people who connect those units to the internet and the back-end payment systems, and site hosts, the people who own the locations where charging takes place, can better protect EV drivers from the dreaded EV charger downtime. We'll also look at the potential role that a set of industry standard quality of service metrics could play in measuring station uptime. As the famous Peter Drucker saying goes, if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. So let's dive in and invite each of our panelists to spend a moment to introduce themselves and their organizations. So if I can invite Diane, first of all, to take the lead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diane Robichaud, and I am the EV Program Manager at NB Power, New Brunswick Power Corporation. And it's interesting because I've been with the company approximately 30 years. 20 of those years were primarily in finance roles within the organization. However, about 10 years ago, I was asked if I would want to maybe participate in the EV file. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure what I was getting myself into, but it's been an exciting, it's been an exciting 8 years, I guess it's been. Who knew that it would be this evolving at such a fast pace that it is? But there is certainly an exciting role for the utility to play in this space. And I'm so anxious and excited to be part of it. So thank you for having me. And thank you, Nino.
Great, thanks very much, Diane. And if I can invite Brian.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm Brian Ross. I manage electric vehicle demonstration projects at Con Edison Company of New York. We're the utility that covers New York City and Westchester County. And I've been in this role for a few years now. It's our EV team, echo what Diane said, and I've been in it a shorter amount of time, but the team has been growing both by headcount, by number of programs and offerings just in the past couple of years. There's a lot of attention in New York State and in New York City on achieving aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals, and with transportation being about a third or so of share of the greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of attention on providing programs to encourage more wide-scale adoption of EVs, both by mass market personal drivers, and then also in heavy duty, medium duty applications. And also say, my specific role is on pilot scale projects, kind of cutting, or let's say leading edge technologies and business models where we work with third parties like FLO to deploy something new. The utility has a host of programs available, and they're all really centered on providing more charging options and more charging availability for customers. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to our discussion.
Great, thanks, Brian. And Louise.
Hello, everyone. My name is Louise Tanguay. I'm the Chief of the Infrastructure Programs at Natural Resources Canada, and I work for the Fuels Diversification Division. Transportation is our business. Similar to you, Diane, I've been with NRCan for over 20 some years, and a couple of years ago, someone asked me, would you be interested to work on the EV file? And I was more into energy efficiency for buildings. So coming to transportation for me was a huge change. And I'm so happy I've made that decision, because I have the chance to be delivering two amazing programs. One called the ZEV Infrastructure Program, and the other one that is a little bit older called the EV and Alt Fuels Infrastructure Deployment Initiative. And my job consists on designing and launching RFP, and then the tough decision on recommending projects for funding. So for me, the chance that I have today to be on this panel and to discuss EV and the charging experience is I feel very grateful to be on the panel. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Louise. And I don't think we envy your role in having to make those recommendations. Challenging work. And Elizabeth, if we can invite you on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nino, and thanks for having me today. My name is Elizabeth France, and I'm the Director of Legal Services and Public Affairs at FLO and Energy. And as many of you know, FLO is a leading North American smart EV charging network, and our parent company Ad Energy is a leading North American EV charging station manufacturer. And listening to all of you and your experience, I've only been with FLO for a couple of years, but the industry is growing so quickly that it feels like a longer time. There's so much happening. I'm located in Vancouver, Canada, and really pleased to be here today to talk to you guys about quality and reliability. And I can tell you that is something that is key to our company. Our mission at FLO is to accelerate electric vehicle adoption by offering the best charging experience to our customers. And so, Nino, to echo your point, we think that making sure that charging stations are working when people need them is a key part of a great charging experience. And we really see an opportunity here to increase transparency and make sure uptime is considered as a critical part of funding and deployment.
Great, thanks very much, Elizabeth. And welcome to all our panel, and thank you very much once again for joining us. So let's move on to our discussion. And I think we can all agree that from the hardware, from everybody on the panel, from the hardware provider, a network manager, to the utilities and our federal government, all have a role to play in improving the user experience of EV drivers. So I'd like to hear from everyone as a bit of a roundtable discussion about what each of you believe a quality charging experience should be, and how you perceive your role within your business role in delivering a quality charging experience for EV drivers today and tomorrow. So let's start with the utilities, and if I can invite Diane and Brian to kick us off, and then move on to Louise and Elizabeth for a better understanding on the policy side. So maybe Diane, perhaps you'd like to kick us off.
Sure, thanks, Nino. From NB Power's perspective, a quality charging experience, I would say, would start from the time that our driver or one of our customers looks at our eCharge network charging map and plans their route right through until the time that they put the connector back in the charger after they've done their charging. So that covers quite a wide range of requirements in terms of what a quality of service is. And we feel MB Power's role to achieve that quality of service for our customer involves many things, such as ensuring that there's chargers along that route and at locations at intervals where they feel comfortable to be able to charge and feel safe charging at that location. So primarily looking at sites where you can go and have a coffee or use the washroom or get a meal while you're waiting. So, that's important to us. And we want to make sure that drivers don't have to wait. That's a big part of the customer experience, we feel. Right now, that's not an issue in New Brunswick because our EV adoption numbers are not tremendously high like they are in other provinces such as Quebec, Ontario, and BC. But, we're keeping an eye on it, and it is going to happen. It's coming. So we want to be aware of that and conscious of that. And one other thing that I must say is the consistency for the drivers. So whether it's the look and feel of the stations, and we've made all of our stations, look alike. So no matter where you charge, you feel like you're at the one that you charged at before. And also the pricing. We require that anyone that participates in our charging network has consistent pricing. So no matter where they charge, they know how much they're going to pay in advance. And then finally, of course, as you brought up, Nino, is they're operational. So our goal is to make sure that they are operational as much as possible, and we're striving for that now. So that's kind of the area, I guess, that MB Power feels that they play a role in this space.
Great, thanks, Diane. That's a very holistic view of the whole end-to-end. Thank you. Brian, it'd be great to hear how you would view it, especially since you're involved in obviously developing pilots as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with everything Diane just said. Just to start off with that, I think all those things are very important considerations. I might add a couple that, but first, just to say, for Con Edison's, from Con Edison's perspective, we're not. We don't own chargers. We don't operate chargers in the same way that some other utilities do. That's a role. Our role in it really is more of a facilitator, say like a catalyst, and our programs providing incentives and rebates for charging station developers and site hosts to put in the chargers and the infrastructure available to drivers. That said, we want to support stations that are going to be successful, and so we don't have a whole lot of stranded assets out there, not providing, not encouraging growth of the market. So with that, the two I would add to that, one is on convenience. And by that, I mean, really, it has to integrate with the driver's kind of regular travel habits. You hear stories now that, in today's New York City charging environment, there aren't very many options. So for someone to get a fast charge or even a time to level 2 charge, you have to kind of go seek it out. And then if that charger isn't in service, you're stuck, right? I mean, you don't have a whole lot of other options, and probably not any options nearby. So it becomes this search for a scarce number of chargers, and that's important, especially in our territory, maybe than others, because we are in a very urban environment, and well over half our customers that own cars park on the street. So they're not able to get a charge at home. They're really reliant on publicly available charging as their primary source. The other one I'll bring up is equity. I think as a company, we have a goal, and it's formed by our regulator, our state, our city goals on equity. So we want to be sure that we're making sure that chargers are available to any and all of our customers that are interested in electric vehicles. Now, our customers that do, not drive, right? Because I think about half our customers don't own a car and never will. We message out that, hey, even by supporting electric EVs and more charging, there are societal benefits, cleaner air, frankly, at times better utilization of the utility system that can benefit everybody. So there's an equity message there too.
The term equities, the equity in charging is a theme I'm increasingly hearing, and interesting that with 50% of your drivers not having the ability to charge at home, that convenience message is really key. It's interesting how interesting hearing from Diane's point, convenience is about making sure chargers are en route in the right locations, because that's a predominant need, but also it has a different meaning in the more urban environment. Thanks, Brian. And Louise.
The quality charging experience for us, I think, well, as a government entity, our role is a little bit more upstream. It's making sure that before you get a quality charging experience, that there's actually a charger there for you to use. And I believe that's what we've done with the investments of budget 2016 and 2017 with our first program, where we were looking at developing a network of fast chargers along the national highway system. So making sure that we had chargers at about 65 kilometers distance for EV drivers to use if they were traveling. And then we realized that investment wasn't enough still. We needed to be there where Canadians live, worked, play. So we introduced in 2019 our ZEV infrastructure program that is looking now at a much more localized investment. Once the investment is made, we also have a role in making sure that those chargers are visible, that they're accessible, and also that they're available to use. And to that effect, what we're doing is we're launching competitive process to select the projects that we're going to invest in. And we make sure that we built into our requirements some elements related to all, like to visibility, to distance, to operation maintenance plan. Even if the program is a capital investment program, we do realize that it's more than just putting the charger there. It needs to be operated by a partner like our proponents that are out there managing the stations and making sure that they're available to their clients. So we have a great concern with that as well.
So that's increasingly a consideration, is what happens to it after it's built and been deployed.
Exactly, and maybe if I can add, and we're also investing into codes and standards. So looking at aligning our codes and standards, making sure that there's some performance requirements for EV charging manufacturers to work from. So that is when I was saying that we are doing a lot of work up front, the work we do on codes and standards is related to that.
Great. That's great, and I think feeds into a topic that we'll be discussing in a little bit more depth, a little bit further in the conversation. Terrific, thank you. Great, and Elizabeth.
Thanks, Nino. All of those responses are excellent and certainly impact the quality charging experience. I might just drill down on kind of one of them in particular, and I think that at this stage in the market development, it's absolutely critical, as we've started talking about, that EV drivers can rely on stations, and because if they can't, they'll tell their friends, their neighbors, their dogs, everybody, and it really doesn't serve us well as an industry, and it slows adoption. And so I think if we're asking people to transition to this new form of transportation, as all of you have said, it has to be convenient, it has to be easy to use, it has to be there. But we would really highlight that, it also has to be reliable. And as a hardware provider, network operator, we obviously have a key role to play in ensuring reliability and promoting reliability. And I can tell you that that concept is key to everything we do, from designing and manufacturing quality equipment to remotely monitoring the status of each of our charging stations. And so that is all to say that I think as an industry and even as a network operator, we certainly have a role to play in ensuring charging station reliability, that stations are available when people need them. And also this concept is a bit new, so also a role in educating, you know, site hosts about the importance of uptime and how we might start to think about that and measure it.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. And I think it'd be great to just continue the conversation with you. If you could perhaps detail some of the perceived issues surrounding quality of service or reliability in the EV charging industry. Is it just as straightforward as station downtime, or are there other factors at play? And what are the issues that we have right now, and what are we trying to solve moving forward?
So yeah, the question of always is it as simple as downtime? And I'm a lawyer, and lawyers always like to complicate things, you know, profusely. So I won't try to do that, but I will give this sort of caveated answer of it really depends who you're talking to. And I think we kind of have to start there in the conversation. So if you're talking to the user, it's really a simple concept. The station has to work when they want it to. If it's not working, that's a problem. If it's not working and they weren't told that it wasn't working, it's sort of a double problem. So from the user perspective, I think they expect the station to work. But getting to that point, as many of us in the industry know, takes a lot of work, from, you know, buying equipment that minimizes downtime from the start, to carefully monitoring and diagnosing issues, you know, to kind of determine the cause of those downtimes. And you know, network operators need to look at what is happening with the stations on their network. They need to incorporate feedback from users, and they need to figure out what causes the problem. And so, you know, just to give some sort of concrete examples, you know, is it an issue with the network communication system? Is it an issue with the station itself, resulting from vandalism or misuse? Or is it something upstream that sort of results from a power failure or external blockage? Because each of those sort of causes of downtime can have a different sort of resolution, solution, or pathway. And so when we're kind of talking about, you know, the problem, I think the perceived issue for a number of users that we hear from is that not all stations really appear to be operating in a way that minimizes downtime, and that can really create a problem for them, and for ultimately for EV adoption. So for network operators like FLO, we're constantly looking at those items, trying to figure out how we can do better, how we can resolve those issues quickly. And I think that's the problem we're trying to solve.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's an interesting thought, that not all stations are operating in a way that actually help them minimize their downtime. I wonder if Diane or Brian or Louise might have anything to add to our current understanding, and certainly, you know, a number of points that Elizabeth has set out on our current understanding of the issues that are getting in the way of a reliable charging experience.
I think I'd like to add the fact that we know that most of the charging occurs at home. So there is, like Elizabeth is saying, we want to create positive experiences, because right now EVs, everything is about awareness, general awareness. And we can hear that, like, I work in this world, so I get questioned, my family, my colleagues, like, I hear about EVs all the time, and I can see an evolution in the questions that are being asked. And I think that perception and awareness is everything. So we want to do everything we can to make sure that if an EV driver shows up at a public station, that it does work, that it is available, and it is a positive experience. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I mean, like I said, there really are few available charging stations in New York City. You know, relatively few. Whereas, you know, in our research of customers, you know, and I don't think it's unique to New York, but there's the availability of charging is top of mind for potential EV buyers, and they want you know, they want EV charger to be there. They want it to be fast in many cases. And so I just think early successes are really important here. If there is bad, if there's bad experiences and those get highlighted, that's going to set us back. So it's really important for early successes.
And I must say, you know, we've had quite a good experience over the past year, I would say. I think, you know, you always have those that when there's negative, when stations are down, yes, for sure. I agree with Brian and Louise that we usually hear about that right off. You never hear the good stories, usually the bad. But it's interesting because our users group here in the province has really been supporting us in terms of if there's comments that come across on Twitter or Facebook. It's usually our users group, the electric vehicle users group in our area that support the work that's being done here. And that's really positive because I don't know about how others feel, but I know utilities typically we don't defend ourselves sometimes because we just don't want that banter going back and forth. However, you know, you see now user groups standing up and defending the work that's being done. So that's a really positive thing that's happening here in New Brunswick.
And seeing more awareness as well. Like I've talked a lot about the investments that we've done in the actual infrastructure, but we have a program that provides funding for awareness campaigns. So, you know, making sure that if you're installing a MURB in a charger into a MURB or a public place, that there's instructions, that there's visibility. So all of these are also very important components of ZEV adoption. And you know, seeing a charger out there makes it real. Like when I drive to the supermarket and I see the charger, I know that this is real. It's, I no longer hear, is EV adoption, is it real? Is it really coming? Like we see the cars on the road all the time now, we see chargers. So it is a reality, and having the chargers out there increases that visibility and that awareness.
Yeah, certainly thank you all. Certainly hearing that awareness and education are sort of key components of this. You know, interesting hearing Diane's comment about the role that EV users groups, owners groups are actually playing in helping in that cause. And I've certainly seen a lot of activity and proactivity from those groups too. Just to comment on Louise's point, most charging is done at home, and that's what a great stat I like to use as well. 80, you know, the general one is 80% of charging is done at home, and it kind of makes sense now where a lot of the people who've got EVs are ones perhaps who can more easily charge at home because they've got driveways and so on. But drawing on Brian's experience, where you know, being New York, you know, 50% you know, don't have that driveway option and are relying on public charging. And so as we go further up the curve of EV adoption, we get this public infrastructure and you know, good you know, readiness at these charging stations is going to be even more important as these people who are perhaps a bit less keen are actually moving into it. So really appreciate those thoughts. Okay, so we'll move on to talk about things from a policies perspective. And given the perceived problems and real problems that we've just been talking about, how do we go about remedying them? And perhaps, you know, Louise, if I can ask you to kick us off and followed by Elizabeth. What can we do to make the charging experience more reliable and therefore more convenient for more North American EV drivers? So Louise.
I think that for us, it's all about code work that we do. So for example, I was just chatting with my colleague, Erin Hoskin, who's in charge of codes and standard and making sure that EV is well integrated into our world and making sure that, you know, the chargers that are being built are meeting a certain requirement. It's not just about the equipment, right? It's also about making sure that new buildings, parking spaces are EV ready, and making sure that, as Brian was saying, like we do consider that a lot of people out there are garage orphans. So what do we do to address that? And one of the investments that we've recently made in 2019 addresses just that. And it was our key argument, like, what do we do with people that don't have access to a garage or to a charger? And how do we address that? And it, you know, it's, yes, the actual infrastructure that's open to the public, that's available for all to use, chargers we see on the street, but also making sure that there's the awareness that's there to, make people knowledgeable that these chargers exist. It's all the tools that we're putting forward. Diane, you've talked earlier about locating the chargers on a map. That's extremely useful. Like we have a tool at NRCan, and I know that all network providers also have tools. There's tons of tools out there that exist, but it's making sure that tools are available, not just the charging experience, but before people leave with their car, like what can we provide them to help them have a positive or a quality experience.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth, would you like to add to that?
Sure, and sort of building on Louise's point about what we need to do to ensure reliability, and it's not just always about the hardware, but it's sort of a more holistic experience, concept. And I think there's a couple of things we can talk about, and I think our focus lately has been on reliability, and I think the point is sort of we need to make sure that we as an industry recognize how important it is that stations work, and that that's really key to the user experience. And then pushing it a step further, I think it's important that it's one way of measuring and assessing sort of value for money. And so when we're looking at government or ratepayer money that is involved, uptime can be an important metric for assessing value for money, so that the investment doesn't just stop at the granting stage, as you sort of alluded to, Louise, but continues on through the life of the equipment and delivers on what it was intended to provide. And once we agree as an industry that it's important to do that, I think we have to develop some consensus on how we measure that and report on uptime, because not everyone's going to have the same view, and we need to make sure that we're sort of comparing apples to apples, where that's appropriate. And then I think the third point I'll just sort of finish with is once we know it's important in issue, and we try to measure it, we have to sort of adjust our expectations. I think in funding programs or when we're thinking about those metrics, to make sure that we're applying sort of the right level of uptime for the use case that is being funded. And so, we can all imagine that there might be different use cases where, uptime and reliability might be absolutely more crucial than in other cases. And so I think it's useful to sort of start that discussion and think about, how we might think about reliability and measure it, so that we can certainly deliver, value for money.
Thank you. It'd be good to bring Brian and Diane in on these ideas and on these comments. Hearing comments from Louise, it's somewhat about design, about making sure building not just new buildings, but others are ready, awareness, and ensuring that there is funding support beyond just the installation process, perhaps, to ensure that the life of the equipment is, throughout the life of the equipment, there is support there. So I wonder if, Diane, perhaps you might like to kick us off, and how realistic are these suggestions, and viable are they?
I think they're very viable and realistic. I know we're currently undergoing a strategy and roadmap exercise, updating one that was, I think, designed, we did it 7 years ago. So given that the industry has changed so much, it was timely to update that. And it was very clear in our strategy and our roadmap exercise that we are going through that policy, external and internal policy, is vital to, as we move ahead with our different initiatives, that is one, that there is a clear path that has to be developed. Another one is the metrics, and we don't, to be honest, we don't have the metrics today that we should have. And it's very much recognized that that's an area that has to be developed. So yes, what Louise and Elizabeth are saying are bang on as far as I'm concerned.
Cool, thank you. Brian?
Yeah, a fundamental goal of the demonstration projects I manage and develop and manage is to get a lot of data they're structured almost as they're structured like a scientific, following the scientific method, right? So we have hypotheses we want to test. We bring in, take in data during the life of it, and then we want to share out a lot of lessons learned. I think we know as a utility, we are, venturing into a space where we need to get better, more familiar with. A lot of our customers that are interested in electrifying fleets, for their operations, are knowledgeable in managing fleet, but not so much in how to electrify that and how to convert over to that fuel. So there's a lot to learn there, both about the charging station equipment and how their operators are going to interact with it, how they're going to use it, how they're going to manage around to optimize utility rates. And I think our policymakers, I'm putting words in their mouth, which is dangerous, but I don't think they would disagree that they have a lot to learn too. So a number of the programs that that we offer that are linked to
I just got a freeze on Brian's commentary. I don't know if the other panelists could nod if they got the same. Okay, so Brian, it looks like you're back. We lost you for a moment there, Brian.
Sorry.
Yeah, you were talking about not wanting to put words in policymakers.
Yeah, and then they cut out on me.
As the government coming in.
Exactly. Like the only point I was making was that we all have a lot to learn, and there's the programs that are set up in our territory now have requirements to share data from developers and operators so that we can ultimately make better programs.
So really the data regarding charging uptime is just one part of really quite a significant data gathering operation that you're deploying, and so uptime it's not an issue for you to be able to provide this.
Uptime is definitely one I think you could think of metrics, maybe others on the call that have similar or different segments. There's operating metrics of equipment. Then there's also like charging session data, right? I mean, we're trying to get a good idea of what's a typical load profile for a station in a fleet application or in a public application. Just trying to get smarter about how they're used and useful.
Great, thank you. So let's dive further into uptime. It's certainly the name of the game for the industry, and as industry grows, it's going to be more and more important to have an established set of defining quality of service metrics. So I think to that very point, how do we go about measuring and standardizing what we've come to know as uptime? Elizabeth, this would be great if you could tell us a little bit more about what what you perceive the measurements behind uptime, and what the industry needs to do in moving forward in creating this standardized definition. And then perhaps I'll ask Louise to weigh in on it as well afterwards.
Sure. So when we talk about sort of uptime, we're ultimately talking about how much of the time a station is available for use or in use for charging. And so any times outside of that are called downtime. And I think it's important to sort of drill down a little bit about what we mean when we're talking about downtime and what is included in that calculation. And so what is included in the calculation versus what is excluded. And so when I say what is included, it means that it might be something that the network operator is responsible for, and versus what it's excluded, it won't count really against the network operator because it's sort of totally outside of their control, or something that would be too expensive to be accountable for, and it's always helpful to think about examples, but, you know, examples like upstream, you know, power failures or things that might constitute sort of force majeure events like major weather or fires. And so in our mind, those things would clearly be excluded from, you know, the downtime calculations, because they're, you know, outside of the control of the network operator. If you kind of move to the other end of the spectrum, there might be other things that should clearly be included when we're talking about downtime, and that might be, you know, a equipment failure or the failure of a network's communication system. And then I think in the middle, there's a whole bunch of things that might be included in the downtime calculation for some use cases and might be exempt in other cases. And it will vary based on the use case. So we can think of, you know, vandalism or misuse of a station. And while the cause of the downtime in that is sort of outside the network operator's control, we can certainly look at the time that it takes the network operator to detect or respond to that issue in terms of measuring and getting some helpful insights about station reliability. And, you know, when I talk about use cases, you know, it may be, if you're talking about a critical piece of fast charging infrastructure on an important corridor, you may have a very different decision about what is included in downtime and what you expect versus one or two level 2 stations in a public charging lot that aren't always occupied. And I think all of that to say is that, you know, it's important that we think about uptime and downtime. We think about what might be included or excluded in those calculations, so that we can ensure that we're all sort of talking about the same thing. And just to drawing on Brian's point, I mean, we have that data. That's one of the pieces that we have. We can look at and start to drill down on what are some of those causes of downtime.
So in considering uptime, there's a stream of issues. You've identified 3 there, and each one needs to be kind of separately audited as part of an overall uptime calculation almost, is that?
I think that's right, and I think it's important for people in industry to sort of agree on the things that, you know, would be included or excluded from those downtime calculations based on sort of a criteria of is it in the network operator's control, is it not, what is the use case scenario, so that we can start to agree on, you know, appropriate acceptable downtime and uptime levels that everyone is aiming for, and that will ultimately, you know, serve the EV driver.
I find it that's great. I find it interesting that chargers in different locations may have different criteria of importance around them as well. Louise, it would be great to hear your thoughts on some of these items.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with everything that Elizabeth is saying. I mean, there some of the downtime reasons that are outside of the control of the network operator. It could be upstream. It could, like, there's so many variables that can put a station down. From a program perspective, what we look at when we're assessing projects is there a strong business case? Like, what happens if that station goes down? Like, what's the impact? Is it the only station around? Is it, like, crucial that the percentage of uptime for that specific station is way up there? We want all stations to be working all the time, but I mean, what's the impact? Also, what's the service standard if the station goes down? Like, do they exist in the application? So that's why when we're asking about the operation maintenance plan, even though I have no teeth once the station is up and running, because I'm capital investment, so I trust that my partners, the people that have invested into those stations with me, you know, we'll make sure that they're up and running. We make sure that at the application stage that it's a very detailed operation maintenance plan. And this is how we select our projects. Just to give you an example, the last RFP, I've received 200 applications. Only a small portion of those applications made the cut. But when I look at the quality of you know, the operation maintenance plans that have been supplied with these applications, I have the confidence to, you know, sign a contribution agreement with that proponent and invest in their project. So it's looking at, you know, the fine details. Have they looked at all, like, what's outside of the control? What, like, which network provider will they work for? if they cannot choose a network provider or an EVSE, can they like give me the specs? And because sometimes some public entities have to go competitive, so they don't know at the application stage who they're gonna have as a supplier. So, but have they thought about all the criteria and all the specs that they want out of not only the equipment, but the service that is given after the equipment is purchased?
That's really insightful, really helpful. I'm also hearing that the severity of downtime may be more or less acute, depending on what other infrastructure is available nearby that may be unaffected. Interesting comments. Thanks, Louise. And so, Brian and Diane, if I could invite you to comment on what you perceive as uptime. Brian, you touched on it earlier, but it'd be great if you'd like to expand on that. And then if I could invite Diane in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the metric to me, I mean, I think of it at a station level and a network level. I don't know that I have much to add more than has already been said, but yeah, I mean, I think it's valid that there could be reasons kind of other than the equipment that are responsible for taking a station out of service. It just gets to how fast can you get that back in service. It's really, it goes back again to making sure that there is clear consumer confidence in the ability to get a charge anywhere.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I guess what I would further say is, and I agree with everything that's being said, our uptake, or the time that we expect our charges to be operational, we strive for 99%. And we do have a service level agreement that supports that. One thing that kind of we've all been faced with is this health crisis of COVID-19 and the impact that has had on the restoration of our chargers. We're in what they call the Atlantic bubble here in New Brunswick, which is really restricting travel outside of that bubble. So, it does make it more difficult to get chargers back in operation. It does impact the uptime or the time to restore. But, it's worked out rather well with our service organization, which is Add Energy, or FLO. They've worked really well with us in trying to, still maintain that uptime. So it's been awesome that way. But it does make us think and look forward to, is there something that we should be doing ourselves internally to maintain our equipment in emergencies such as these in the future, because we weren't expecting this. And so it certainly made us think and see what role we need to play in maintaining our assets as much as possible. I know it's not completely, we're not able to do it completely, but play like a minor role in this to help bring them back online sooner.
Thanks, Diane. And a good point regarding the ability to maintain them during the time of COVID, which is obviously still going to be around for a while. Question for you, Diane and Brian. Is charging infrastructure regarded as critical infrastructure in your regions right now? Therefore, even during COVID shutdown times, people are still able to get out and go and repair them.
We have been deemed as an essential service, charging in the province. So that has really helped, getting our service organization across the border and into New Brunswick. So yes, we have been.
In New York, I'm not sure what the current status is. I know earlier on in the spring, when construction was suspended, that construction of charging station infrastructure was not deemed as critical. But I'm not sure the current status.
Good. Hopefully they'll get the right idea. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks all for that conversation. It'd be good to talk about the role of public funds and the impact of it. And should the definitions around these quality of service metrics be influenced by the presence of public funds? given that those funds have been so instrumental to the deployment of this infrastructure. Now, obviously, this deployment wouldn't be possible without the incentives and rebates that have helped subsidise the cost of these stations. Certainly from a public point of view, but obviously, Brian, effectively that's the role that you're helping to enable as well. Louise, I wonder if you might kick us off and be able to tell us whether you see that where public funds come with an added responsibility, where public funds come in, is there also an added responsibility to the public that those charges are serving?
Well, public funds do come definitely with an increased responsibility, and we take this very seriously. When I was talking earlier about the success of the programs and the several proposals that we get and that we assess, we always look at a project not only from its technical perspective, but essentially who are we getting in bed with? Are they financially viable? Is the technology that they're proposing, is good? Do they have a strong business case? Diane, I feel sorry for you because I know you've gone through my due diligence process a couple of times for funding, and you know how rigorous we are, and New Brunswick Power is considered a public entity because it's owned by the province, but we are extremely rigorous when we select project, when I say we, it's not me choosing the project. I work with a committee of reviewers, of experts from different departments. And when we do recommend projects for funding, I'm very proud to say that they are la crème de la crème. They're the best projects out there at that moment when the RFP was opened. And we have a very rigorous approach in performing our due diligence, not only from a technical standpoint, but also financial and also business case. When it comes to the operation of the chargers themselves, right now I was mentioning earlier that it's not an area where we have a lot of reach, although we do ask a lot of questions at the entry gate. I don't know, maybe in the future we'll see recommissioning programs or funding programs for recommissioning stations or upgrading stations, who knows. But for the moment, it's not an area that we're in. There's just too much work to be done in deploying the chargers and making sure that we are working with partners that are strong, that have a case for their investment, and also that can ensure that the stations are up and running.
Great, thank you. And Brian, obviously you're not dealing with public money in the same way, but I wondered if you might have a view about the need to put quality of service metrics into the partners that you work with.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, as I said, we're not operating, but I do think it's very important to have partners that can operate well. I think that, it's something we have to, as a utility that is a source of funding, but also of information. I mean, we're going to get asked, and we're already being asked by many customers, many developers, many that might be potential site hosts, questions about how to do this well. So I think that is all part of the learning experience for us in getting into this new new line of business.
Cool, thank you. And so Elizabeth, if we can ask you to comment, do you see quality of service metrics as really a key way to going about improving the charging experience for end users? And is there anything in particular that we should be focusing on out of the range that we've discussed today as we help service this fast-growing industry?
Yeah, no, I think we've had a lot of great comments, and I think one of the things that we've been thinking about is we have to remember to find the right balance between developing reliability standards that will ultimately serve the end user, but also being aware of the fact that we're still in an emerging industry and we need to preserve that kind of flexibility and you know, we've seen lots of you know, demands for RFPs not to be too stringent, but also to preserve that flexibility. But you know, that being said, I think with the smart charging data that we have available, there's certainly no reason why we can't start to develop common metrics for reliability, so that, you know, everyone in the industry is being compared to the same standard, apples to apples, and we're playing by the same rules. And that will ultimately make it, you know, hopefully easier for funders and things like that to evaluate projects, and for site hosts to know that they are also getting value for money, and the investment is working as intended. And certainly at FLO, we're here to help make that happen, to keep this conversation going, and make sure that this develops in a way that's great for the EV user, and really enhances their experience. I think because at the end of the day, you know, in our view, good and transparent reporting and having clear rules sort of around this area really leads to the best kind of competition in our industry, and competition that makes things better for site hosts and EV drivers. And so maybe I'll just end with that and turn it back to you, Nino.
Okay, thank you. We do have just a couple of minutes before the hour, so I'm going to try and sneak in one question for the panel. The question is from Daniel Deleuze. Thank you all for sharing your views and knowledge on this fast charging industry. You've mentioned maintaining assets and minimizing downtime as a concern in the market. Do you find physical damage of the connector or cable as a common cause? So maybe Diane might have some good insight on that, and perhaps Elizabeth and perhaps Brian in your pilot.
Well, I can actually say we started installing level 2 chargers in 2013, and in our fast chargers we started in 2017, and I can say we have not had any damage at all due to vandalism. We have had one incident where a snowplow pulled over, connected with a cable and pulled it over, but we've since replaced those with retractable cables. So, but no vandalism at all at any of our sites.
Thanks, Diane. And anyone else who'd like to comment on that question?
I know that we have, I mean, our deployment and support team is alive to these issues. I think there are certain stations that have been vandalized. There are definitely some examples, and I think probably they're in more certain regions rather than others. And so I wouldn't say it's, you know, something that happens every day, but it's certainly something that does happen, and that you know, network operators need to be prepared to respond to.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Dan. And a big thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you very much for being so generous, sharing your time and expertise today, and for FLO for convening this important and very helpful conversation. The recording of this webinar will be available for subsequent viewing on FLO's YouTube channel, and it's one of many conversations that we'll be having on EV charging infrastructure. So thank you all once again to our panelists, and to everybody who's listened in today. Thanks very much, and yeah, we look forward to connecting with you afterwards. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.